Hello, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to be here today with our first masterclass. Hopefully, something that we're going to carry on and be able to offer incredible content, helping everybody out with information and as much uh, knowledge as possible to get us through these difficult and challenging times. It's an immense pleasure to be able to introduce you to a friend and somebody I admire, somebody who has already taught me and helped me immensely during this period. Jeff Chatterton and we met actually when I was being an observant of one of his talks. What I think it was like a month or two ago, but it feels like years ago. Just because things now just kind of roll that way. One day feels like weeks, weeks feel like years, and so months it's like decades. Um, but I think that I was very impressed with Jeff's ability to really coin the moment that I was going through. And when months ago I was in the middle of what really was like a storm and I was very confused, he was able to tell me exactly what I was feeling. And I sent a video out to the industry right at the beginning, just sharing what this period had meant to me. And one of the examples I gave was that I was speaking to a friend who said, right at the beginning, who told me, Tina, you have to forgive yourself. And I remember I told Jeff, I said, forgive myself for what? Like I didn't do anything wrong. And he said, you have to forgive yourself because you're not going to be able to save everyone and you're not going to be able to stop the storm. And it's like, the Titanic is sinking, or he gave some image like that, and you're not going to be able to save the whole thing. And I remember when he said those words to me, I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. And then, a few weeks later, I was listening to him speak again. And in a completely different way, he summarized what I was going through. And I thought, wow, if we could have him around just to summarize our lives in a, monthly basis, Jeff, this would be really good. Because it's very helpful in understanding what we're going through. And so we talked a lot. And I said, if I could share this knowledge and this ability that you have with the rest of the community, I think it would help so many people. And as we speak to our clients and our friends and our partners, whether if they're travel agents or hotel owners, or if they own a DMC, or if they work in fashion, it really doesn't matter. If you're in an industry that's being affected by all this, and most of ours, at least in our realm, are, very often the first thing you do is stay silent, by fear of not knowing what to say, or not wanting to say the wrong thing, or to look silly. And as the time went by, and speaking to Jeff, I thought, wow, that's the one thing that we can't do. And I have to help people to break the silence. I have to help people to and Jeff was the one that said, he says, if you don't kick the ball, you can't make the goal. So, your chances of scoring if you don't kick are zero. And I thought, if I'm going to put together a masterclass, I need to start with the basics, and it's giving our industry a voice again. It's being able to help people have the courage to communicate, and it doesn't matter, getting it wrong isn't the biggest deal. Is putting yourself out there is so important. So, Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to share your knowledge with us, and help us coin our new reality. And I am very excited to be part of this. And what I'm going to ask everybody who's listening is to please feel free to ask questions throughout. I'm going to be very rude, and I'm going to interject and interfere and interrupt during his
I don't do
presentation.
formal. I don't do formal. It's all good.
So I'm going to go ahead and be rude a little bit, but at least the idea is to keep it very casual, is to keep it fun, is to keep it interactive, is for everybody to be able to ask questions, and I'll be your voice, because there are a lot of us between Zoom and live on YouTube. So Jeff, the mic is yours. Thank you very much for agreeing to be here. And it's a huge pleasure.
We're gonna have a blast. I'm enjoying it. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and it's like anything else. I think we can all say, I wish we could get to know each other under better circumstances, but these are the circumstances that we've got, and so let's make the best of the circumstances that we have, and that's what it's all about. We're here, just pushing forward. I A little bit about me. I do crisis communications exclusively. Let me see if I can share my screen here, just so that.
Oh yeah, by the way, I spoke about you and I forgot to say what you do. So I'll let you take over. I get so excited about telling our story. I forgot to that little point of view. Who is this guy?
So there we go. Title screen. There we go. The agenda is not really that fancy. What the important point is, yeah, jump in, interrupt. Tina is going to interrupt, and that's awesome. That's what it's all about. We're here to jump in and move around and actually get some stuff done. So that's absolutely perfect. Yeah, I do crisis communications exclusively. I just finished a book called Leaders Under Fire. It just came out. It's on Amazon. On I call it the CEO's Survival Guide to Navigating a Corporate Crisis. But I'll tell you the same thing I've told everyone else, which is it doesn't really matter how much expertise you have. Anyone who can claim to be an expert at what it is we're going through right now is full of crap. Right? No one's dealt with this. This is absolutely unprecedented, and that's okay. It's hard, it's rough, it's scary, but it's okay because there are some principles that are going to universally be accepted as we move forward. And so, without wasting a lot of time, let me just dive right in. And again, feel free to jump in and interject. But the first thing I always tell people, look, yeah, you know what? It sucks right now. I get it. It's absolutely horrible. I have a friend of mine who was actually a former Navy SEAL, and he said that they have an expression: "Embrace the suck." The suck is where the opportunities lie. And apologies if that's coming across as being rude. I'm not trying to be rude, but I think we can all agree that we're just in a really rough time right now. Now, the best example I've ever seen on what it is the entire travel and hospitality industry is going through. If you go back to January 2020, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was an entire lifetime ago. You're charging down the road. You've got growth plans, you've got construction permits happening, you're putting together your marketing campaign for summer 2020, you've got all sorts of things coming along, and there's a massive corner in the road. And anyone who, like myself, understands auto racing knows that when you've got a corner on the racetrack, you've got two options. Now, what I think a lot of people in the industry have done is they've gotten too far into the corner and they go, "Oh my gosh, a corner," and they panic and they slam on the brakes. And quite frankly, bad things happen if you haven't anticipated that corner coming up. And I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm not trying to be glib, but you need to understand, and you need to be able to compensate. You need to understand that you can't dive full speed into those corners or bad things happen. But conversely, if you recognize corners for the opportunities that they are, really crazy things can happen. When you anticipate that corner, when you can steer into that corner, when you can accelerate coming out of that corner, that's where overtakes happen. That's where opportunities lie. It's a beautiful thing to watch when it's done properly. Unfortunately, a lot of folks across and it's not just you, it's not just me, it's everyone, are wondering what on earth is going on. What's the next corner? What's the next thing? Right? So let's take a look at the whole situation. Right now, the hospitality industry has been decimated, absolutely destroyed. It's horrifying out there. A lot of hotels are closed, period. A lot of major tourism destinations are completely closed down. A lot of future bookings have fallen right off the calendar. Forget about the fact that you're closed right now because of a government travel restriction. That affects everyone. There's nothing that anyone can do about that. That's just one of those things that we have to deal with. But what are we doing about your future bookings? I mean, this is inevitably going to open up at some point. At some point, flights are going to turn back on. People are going to start to want to travel again. Why aren't people booking? Why aren't people making travel plans? So right now, everyone's kind of looking at each other and going, man, I wish I had more people at my facility. I wish I had more guests. I wish I had more revenue. But this stupid coronavirus thing is really kicking my butt. And I'm here to tell you a really hard reality, which is the coronavirus is not your real problem. The coronavirus affects everyone. For the first time in human history, everyone can claim to be a victim. So you've got to ask yourself, do you want to be a victim or do you want to be a victor? So the real problem is not the coronavirus. Decreased bookings is not your problem. Decreased bookings is a symptom. The problem is that you're not trusted. Trust is one of those really crazy things, and it's so critically important right now. It is so massively crucially needed. It's thirsted for. It's yearned for. They desperately want to trust you. They just don't trust you. They can't trust you yet, right? The issue, quite frankly, is that a lot of tourism companies, a lot of hotel companies, a lot of hospitality companies, and by the way, I'm not talking like independent boutique people with a limited set of employee skills. I'm talking either massive multinational corporations like the Marriotts and the Hiltons. They're really great at promotion, but they have zero experience when it comes to playing defense. It's called a proactive stakeholder management process, which is really fancy terms for what I just like to call the bounce back plan. What are you doing in order to bounce back? If you have the right process, things get easier. It's just a case of, quite frankly, you don't have the right process in place right now. If you have the right process, it becomes dramatically easier for you as a hospitality owner, as a tourism provider. What we're trying to do is to create a system that actually lets you grow and thrive, not just survive. Everything just becomes dramatically easier. But a lot of the marketing speak and the semantics, let me just really dive into what that looks like so that we don't have to sit there and play, fancy word games. Really, what we're trying to do is ultimately bring them back. So who is them, right? Because, by the way, for some tourism companies, them at the moment are your staff. Sometimes a lot of hotel operators have had to lay off all of their staff and they need their A team back. Maybe not everyone, but they certainly need their core management team. Maybe it's your frequent guests, maybe it's your investors, but you need to bring them back. And in order to do that, again, we're going to start to get proactive here, not reactive, because in times of crisis, I have a word for what you call a highly reactive organization. And quite frankly, you're not going to like the word, right? There is no time to be reactive right now. You need to get out in front. You need to be proactive. So what are the things that you can do now? Simple, manageable, human-oriented steps that can actually jump out in front of this thing. So I desperately need you to stop thinking about reacting to coronavirus and start thinking about what are we going to do to get out in front of it and to be the trusted, credible source for our people. And in order to do that, you need to create your bounce back plan. Either you're creating a plan and you're planning on how to do this, or you're going to plan to die. It's honestly, guys, it's not that difficult a process or a concept. If you don't have a plan in place, you're not planning. And if you don't have that plan, you will not survive. So what are you going to do? So I always tell my folks, look, all stakeholders are not created equal. So I want you to start prioritizing all of the different folks that are out there. Maybe it's your employees, maybe it's your investors, maybe it's members of your gold card loyalty program, maybe it's corporate meeting planners. You've got a list, and by the way, that list should be, if you're doing this properly, 200 names long, well over 100 for any good, decent size management tourism operation. Now, they're not all the same. So there's a couple of different things that I can walk you through. In 45 minutes, we're not going to come up with an entire stakeholder management program, but I do want you to start to think about who is the most important to you in terms of overall success. And the other thing that I think is really critically important to you is on a scale of 1 to 10, if you had to rank them, where would you rank them in terms of how much do they like you? How much do they trust you? Because if you have audience out there that are really critically important for you and they don't trust you, you're in for a heap of trouble. You can't afford to do that. So this is not a, oh, let's think about this exercise. No, this is a formal, I'm going to actually assign you some homework. You need to actually write this down, right? But come up with a formal list of your stakeholders. And that's the first step of what I call the bounce back even stronger playbook. When you actually have it and you can sit there and you could say, okay, I now clearly can see that these groups are important. These groups are important, but not as important. Therefore, it's going to be more important that I prioritize working with these. These groups are not as important, but it's really important that they trust me right now. So I need to focus on that. It just gives you a game plan, because I can promise you, if you've done this right, you will have discovered some stakeholders that you've forgotten about, that you've just kind of skipped over. And in order to do that, you need to start to get non-conventional. So brainstorm, get out the whiteboard, get out, the big sheets of paper, but start coming up with that list of priority stakeholders. Do it formally and write it down. Now, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and chances are good, just off the top of my head, I can come up with some ideas and some names and some thoughts and some stakeholder groups that you probably haven't even considered yet. Obviously, people talk about past customers. That's an easy one. Obviously, your future clients, the people who you knew were intending on booking. Now start to get non-conventional. I did a lot of work with tourism operators in South and East Africa immediately after the Ebola crisis. Back in 2014, they were desperately trying and failing to convince the world that Ebola was thousands and thousands of miles away, which is true, but it wasn't working. And I'm going to tell you why that message didn't work in a minute. But when we finally got past that, one of the things that the Ethiopians managed to do quite successfully, in fact, was to reach out to the Coptic Christian community. So different faith-based organizations, different cultural associations. They were able to put on a come visit the birthplace of your faith campaign that worked really well for a number of different operators. This is the time to reach out to your competitors. This is the time to talk to different charitable organizations and partners. Then you've got your internal stakeholders, things like your employees, your regulators, your investors, city councilors. If you're not on a first name basis with your local city councilor, you really should be, especially right now. The external yet still internal business people, like your own suppliers, your DMCs, all of the funny tourism acronyms that are out there. If you haven't actually gotten on the phone with them in the last 6 weeks, you need to be doing that. And that's okay if you haven't. There are some people that you will have missed. And I'm going to tell you, that's okay as long as you're doing it on purpose. I'm all right with doing it on purpose. I'm not okay with you doing it if you just happen to forgotten about them. So that's why we're going to write this down. We're going to come up with a prioritized list of stakeholders. But then, I'm not kidding, I want you to ignore some of your audience. So this funny looking graph is the what I call my audience map. So it's 5 different groups of people, and some of them love you, some of them hate you. There's a lot of in between. I'm going to give you the same data broken down in a different format. So it's the exact same numbers, but we're going to work our way across this chart. So On the far left are what I call supporters. These are people who love you. They adore you. It does not matter what you say or do, they will back you up. This is your mom, right? This is not your spouse, by the way. These are people who love you no matter what, right? But it's only about 1% of the universe. Then there are people who really do like you a lot. They are active, they're plugged in, they're engaged. Now, every now and then, about one time out of every 5 or 6, if you say or do something dumb, they're going to tell you that you're doing something dumb, and chances are good they may do it publicly and loudly, and that's awkward and ugly, but they like you for the most part. And I call them sympathizers, and it's about 3% of the audience. Now there's straddlers. Straddlers are the people who are vaguely aware that you exist. They may not even know or care that you exist. It's a whopping 90% of the world. Then you have the same kind of audience breakdown on the opposite end. You have skeptics. Skeptics don't like you. They're publicly engaged in not liking you. They're the ones who are writing letters to the editor. They're the ones who are issuing complaints. They're the ones who are, protesting outside your facility, whatever. Maybe it's the local union who's upset with your workplace conditions. You can go on and on and on. But skeptics don't like you. About one time out of every 10 or 15, you may come up with something and they're going to come out and publicly go, okay, you know what, that's a good idea. But for the most part, they're not going to do that. And then there are splenetics. And again, 1% of the universe. I almost had to find a word that started with S, but I call it the people who will cut their own spleen out just to spite you. They hate you. It does not matter if you announced a public relations initiative where every employee and every future guest were to get a check for $1 million. Their only response would be, well, how come it's not 2 million? It does not matter what you say. It does not matter what you do. They hate you. Now, here's the challenge that we're facing, and it's a challenge that we're facing as hotel operators, as tourism providers right now, especially now, which is in tough times, we tend to focus on the people at the opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, right now, especially now, who doesn't want to hang out and have some human connection with the people who love us? On the other hand, why do we talk to splenetics? It's because they dictate the agenda. They're a pain in the butt. They're the ones yelling and screaming and kicking up a fuss and trying to get you shut down. If you announce that you're about to reopen your tourism attraction, if they announce that you're about to reopen your hotel, they're the ones who are furious and kicking up a crap storm on Facebook or on Twitter, on social media. They're the ones who are absolutely a pain in the butt. And that's where we spend all our time. Now, marketers would tell you, traditional marketing, peacetime marketing, would tell you that you need to go after the straddlers. That's where all the people are. And I'm here to tell you, this is why you don't want a traditional vanilla marketing team handling your communications right now, because that's going to be tremendously ineffective for you. You can't afford to do that. Here's your secret weapon. You're going to take 100% of your communications focus, your communications energy, all of your mental brain power, all of your thinking, and you're going to drop that into the lap of 3% of your audience. Because here's the thing, those skeptics may be a pain in the butt. They may be loud, they may be bitchy, they may be miserable, but they're asking legitimate questions. When they say, how dare you think about opening, how you can't guarantee safety, that's not an illegitimate question. That's a legitimate question that needs to be answered. So what's going to happen? Eventually, the straddlers are going to wake up. Eventually, everyone's going to start paying attention to what's going on. And they're going to hear two people talking. Now, on one end, you're going to have the splenetics who are yelling and screaming and complaining like chickens with their heads cut off. And on the other hand, they're going to have you, and you're going to be calmly, empathetically, caringly, and compassionately answering all the really legitimate concerns that people have. And when they see that, It's not even close. You will win that fight every single time. It doesn't matter whether you're concerned about your city councilor, whether you're concerned about your investors, whether you're concerned about your employees or your future bookings. When you are talking to the skeptics and you're out there and you're answering their concerns and you're doing it well, that is a communications superpower. Now,
Jeff, I'm gonna ask you a few questions, okay? Just because
absolutely.
we're having a few people that are asking us how what would you recommend if you are an independent travel advisor? And I think that listening to you, you would probably recommend the same things. And I think I'll let you answer that without me doing it. But would the same apply if you're independent, if you are an independent travel advisor? And the second question is, that this is also from a travel agent, that they believe that possibly trust in itself is not the issue, because a lot of them have very close relationships with their clients, um, because they feel that they have it. But what do they not trust is the current situation, the airlines, the hotels, the safety. So if you could just elaborate a little bit, because I think we're all speaking the same language.
Mhm.
When you mentioned they don't trust, it doesn't, do you mean, do they not trust them, or do they not trust the reality or the situation of the hotels? And the first question, does all of this apply if you're also a travel agency?
It applies whether you're a travel agency. It applies whether or not you're my mother, right? Trust is like the engine oil that lubricates commerce. Trust is what allows people to trust each other and to allow business to happen. So if you're an independent travel advisor and you were to come out there and say, yeah, absolutely, it's completely safe and fine to visit Brazil right now. United Airlines is still flying one flight a day. Let's go. Um, they may like you, they may really engage with you, they may have worked with you in the past, but they're still going to have some really fear-based questions. And unless you have a strategy in place for how to answer those questions, you are losing trust. Trust is one of those things that's tremendously easy to squander. And it's not even on purpose. But there, it doesn't matter whether it's the situation at large. It doesn't matter whether it's they don't like the shirt you're wearing that day. Um, they need to be able to trust you and the information that you're giving them. Does that make sense? Does that make a little more
No,
clear?
and I think, yeah, no, I think it does. And I think that when we're looking at this community, they're all very knowledgeable about the market and the situation. And so I think realistically, nobody would tell their clients to come to Brazil, even though I'm in Brazil right now. And I could say, we're also in quarantine and it's all fine considering everybody's reality. And United is flying, so it's all true. Um, but
And
what
that's a great example because by fact, United is flying. By
Yeah,
fact, I have a friend, and it's you, who's in
yeah,
Brazil, who will tell me that it's safe, right?
if you come to my
By
house.
On a black
Yeah.
and white level, this is a no-brainer. But we all
Yeah,
know it's not that simple.
it's not that simple. But so the question is, if we all know that it's not that simple, if we all know that you can't tell somebody to get on a plane and travel now, or even tomorrow, or maybe next month, or next, basically nobody knows, right? So we're all in
Mhm.
a situation that nobody knows when it's safe to travel. Nobody knows. I think we all believe it will come back, but we don't know in which shape, in which form, what it's going to look like. And how do I, so if I am, let's use this example, an independent travel consultant, and I have my clients who trust me, and I've built that trust for so long, and I want to communicate with them, but suddenly I can't communicate about travel because I'm going to get stuck in a sense that, what do I tell you? I don't know. I don't know when it's back. I'm
Oh,
happy that, so now what do I do? How do
um,
I don't want to damage that trust. So I'm at home staying quiet because I don't want to say the wrong thing or lose their trust, because as you said, it's very easy to lose it. It takes a long time to build it, but it's very quick to lose. So then what?
so you know what you know what I'm tempted to say is, can you ask me that question in 7 minutes?
That's what
Because
you know what my answer was to them? I wrote, they asked a question and I said, wait for it, he'll get there.
I'm gonna get there.
I know. Go ahead, go ahead. Yeah. It's the impatient thing, you know. We all want. Yeah. Go on.
And let's skip it. Look, at the end of the day, you need the plan. If you don't have a plan, you're just dealing in chaos. You need to explicitly figure out exactly where you're going to go. And to Tina's point, we're not going to talk about facts. We're not going to talk about United's travel schedule. We're not going to talk about whether or not the hospitals are overflowing in Sao Paulo. We're not going to get into any of those sorts of things. When people ask questions about travel, we can't tell them answers, because whether or not Portugal is open, whether it's closed, whether hotels are open, because we don't know. And that's okay, because crisis communications isn't about facts. Trust is not about facts. Um, the let me give you just an informal example. If someone were to walk into your office or your hotel lobby or your business office and grab their neck and fall over dead, that would typically be a crisis. But it's not a crisis when that happens in a hospital. Now, why is that? Well, because people are expecting that in a hospital. It's a tragedy, absolutely, but it's not a crisis. It's not a reputational hit to your damage to your reputation. Uh, and that's the first rule of crisis communications: is crisis communications isn't about what's actually happening. Crisis communications isn't about the travel situation. Crisis communications is about how people feel about the facts. If people are upset, now you've got a crisis, right? If they're upset with you, you have got a very specific crisis. But it's not about the facts of what's going on out there. When someone says, "Hey, do you sanitize your hotel rooms between each visit?" You can't say, even if it's true, "Yes, we've adopted hospital grade sanitation practices." When someone says, "Have any of your staff tested positive for COVID-19?" Even if it's true, you can't get away with, "No, everyone here has a clean bill of health." You can't get away with, "Is it safe to travel to Brazil right now, or Portugal or Australia or anywhere else?" Absolutely. The government has removed the travel ban. That's not going to work. And let me explain very clearly why, right? We are dealing with emotional challenges. When you're an independent travel advisor, when you're the head of marketing for a major hotel, when you are the guy in charge of mopping the floor, at the moment, what everyone is dealing with is an emotional problem. They're dealing with emotional questions. They're not really asking, are your rooms clean? They're asking, can I trust you? They're not really asking, all of those sorts of things. They're saying, can I trust you with the safety of myself and my family? So the example I give people, and I need you to kind of set aside your tourism hat, set aside your travel agent or your hotel hat, anything else, and I want you to start to think about being a grandparent. I'm not a grandparent myself, but start to think about that one overly caring, empathetic person. So I'm a dad. I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they don't do it anymore. But when my 6-year-old boy was going to bed, sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night, especially at 1 or 2 in the morning when I'm fast asleep, and come screaming downstairs because he's upset because there's monsters under his bed. I think everyone's been there at one point or another. And so, as a parent, I will tell you straight up that I can go upstairs, kick the door open, and go, "There's no such thing as monsters, go back to sleep," which is a factually correct response. Or I can go up, give my boy a big squeezy hug, settle him down, pat him on the back, give him a drink of water, explain that daddy is there to keep him safe and that mommy and daddy are right downstairs. And no matter what, you live in a safe house and aren't monsters silly, right? Now, you tell me which one's going to work, right? I mean, this is a no brainer. Obviously, at 2 in the morning, if you're a 6-year-old, it's not a fact-based response that they are looking for. And that is an essential human emotion that hasn't gone away 50 years later. There, we've looked at What are the emotions that we need to touch on when it comes to building trust? What are the things that we can do in order to get people to trust us? They may not agree with us, they may not like us, but they will still trust us. So we've looked at that and we've identified four. There are four emotional triggers. So the first one, it's politically incorrect, but I still maintain it's correct, which is where most men screw up, is honesty. Am I telling the truth? And I have worked with a lot of corporate CEOs in a lot of boardrooms, and effectively their answer is, this is ridiculous. I'm telling the truth. They know I'm telling the truth. Why don't they just believe us? Honesty is critically important, but it's only about 20% of the pie. If they believe you and they believe that you are telling the truth about the fact that your hotel is clean or anything else like that, that's great, but it's still only 1 out of every 5 people will choose to trust you based on honesty alone. Okay, so what else is out there? So there's expertise. Do I know what I am talking about? Yes, in fact, I have a doctorate in epidemiology. I have university affiliated professors who've come in and reviewed our sanitation programs. I have all sorts of letters after my name. It doesn't matter. Everyone acknowledges I'm the world's leading expert and I am telling the truth. That's still only about 1/3 of my audience is going to trust me. Okay, so what else is there? Well, dedication. Are we going to do whatever we need to do in order to ensure our client safety? Yes, I'm going to bring a sleeping bag. I'm going to sleep under my desk until I know that we are absolutely living up to our end of the bargain. That's fine, but it's only half. That's half your audience, and there's only one left. Now, if you get this one right, you're golden. But if you get this one wrong, you're dead. This is the critically important thing. In fact, if you're gonna run into me in the street a year from now, and you say, "Hey, I heard you a webinar you did," and I'm gonna look you in the eye and go, "It is really great to meet you. Can you tell me the one thing you remember about that webinar?" Here's the thing I need you to remember, because it is the most critically important thing that I will tell you and anyone else. That one critical, essential piece of being a trusted, honored spokesperson all boils down to empathy. They need to know that you know how they feel. You don't need to agree with how they feel. You just need to know and be able to communicate to them that you know how they feel. If they don't feel like their emotions are being heard, they will move heaven and earth in order to communicate those emotions. That's how you get splenetics. That's how you get the skeptics who are yelling and screaming and writing angry letters on social media and being all furious about what's going on. Empathy is like, it's like fire retardant foam. Empathy, if your room is on fire, a lot of people, your natural inclination is to dive into that room with a hammer and nails and some drywall and fix the broken room. And you can't do that if the room is still on fire. You need to go and calm the fire first. You need to put out the fire. That's what you do with empathy. After that, then you can go in with honesty and dedication and trust, and you can rebuild the room. But the fire retardant foam to put the fire out in the first place and calm everyone down is empathy. It's your superpower. If you do this right, it is powerful stuff. When you do it wrong, it's not going to work. There are good ways of communicating empathy. There are bad ways of communicating empathy. You know what? I'm concerned about the coronavirus too is a really lousy empathy statement. You have a right to be concerned about the coronavirus. Lousy. I share your concerns about reopening. See, the problem with all three of those things is that all you're doing is reflecting their own negative feelings back. You're focusing on the facts. You're focusing on coronavirus. Remember, crisis communications, it's not about facts. We're not here to communicate facts. We're here to communicate emotion. We're here to communicate empathy. We're here to communicate compassion. How do we do that? So my personal favorite, I'm a big fan of, you know what? Hey, Tina, I've asked myself that very same question. You're off and running with that. I've looked into this because I know that that's an important issue to you. Here's what I can tell you. Boom, and you're off and running. Maybe it's, hey, you've raised an issue which means a lot to me as well. So here's what I'll tell you. Right, you're not focusing on COVID-19. You're not focusing on the coronavirus. What you're focusing on is, we've asked ourselves the same question. We are caring. We are empathetic. We are listening to you. That is what is so critically important and what you need to be focused on doing. At that point, the facts become secondary. The facts need to be there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, at no point does this work if you're lying. This is about telling the truth. Uh, but when you have a really solid empathy at play, that is your superpower. That is really what this boils down to. When you can empathetically communicate, and maybe to be fair, the answer is, I don't know. Is it safe to travel to Brazil right now? And the answer is, I don't know. You know what? Hey, John, you know what? I've asked myself that same question. I don't know the answer to that right now. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that right now. I'll tell you this, we're going to do everything we can to find an answer. And the minute we do have better information, I can communicate that to you. That is a fair answer. That's going to build you trust. That's going to build you repeat business. That's where you were needing to go. And whether you're the independent provider, whether you're the hotel owner who is communicating to your future customers, if you're relying on traditional vanilla marketing right now, if you're focused on your old school communications where, hey, come on out and see the beautiful beaches. If you're, look at the wonderful history, come out and experience a life of luxury and get some wonderful massages. That's not going to help. It's not going to work. It's not going to play. It's a new world. Right now, your audience desperately needs to know that you know how they feel. Your regular marketing isn't gonna play right now. Your audiences are different, your marketing is different, your messages are different. And if you try to communicate in May 2020 as if it's January 2020, you're gonna pay a price. So the fourth and final piece of advice I could offer on this is, honestly, guys, don't try to do this on your own. That's why we have a community like this. That's why Tina has brought together all of you here now, just because you don't need to do this on your own, right? Doing this on your own is like doing heart surgery on yourself. It's impossible. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. You've got some resources available. Take advantage of those resources. So look, in summary of what just the real quick hits of kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah, look, corners are happening. I get it. And corners aren't fun, but corners happen. And along with corners come opportunities. Bouncing back will happen, but only if you have a plan. You need to outline exactly who you're going to reach out to. You need to outline exactly how you're going to do it, with what messages you're going to do it with, and more importantly, what you're going to say to them, what you're going to do for them that indicates that you have heard how they feel. You need a plan that's going to let you build versus struggle to survive. If you don't have that in place, you will flail and then fail. Don't flail and fail. Build and plan and grow and strive to thrive. So there's my only attempt on the day at being a poet.
Um, I'll let you finish your list and then I'll gonna interrupt you.
Honestly, yeah, real quickly, hit this with empathy. It's all about empathy. It's not about catchy slogans. It's not about funny ads. It's not about, whatever, come see our wonderful massage or wonderful beaches. You need to empathize with an audience that's very scared and timid right now. And again, don't do this on your own. There is help. There is help available. I know Tina and I were having a wonderful conversation just an hour and a half ago. We're talking about we can sit down and chat with you one-on-one. We will sit there, and because if you have some concerns, well, first things, if you have questions, hit us up in the comment section right here and now. That's what we're here for. We want to talk. We want to have this turn into an informal conversation. But secondly, if you have the idea, you want to sit down and have a conversation with myself or with Tina, you want to talk about your marketing, you want to talk about your communications, you want to talk about your business operations or your flow, honestly, that's what we're here for. That's what we do. And if you check your email, if you've registered for the webinar, Tina's going to be sending out some really cool information that we've set up in order to be able to make those one-on-one, confidential, completely discreet conversations happen. Absolutely no obligation. It's just one of the things that we like to do in order to make sure people feel like they're being felt and heard, because it's our job to empathize right now with all of you. So
nicely
Tina.
put. And that's I think that's the biggest message of this session today is empathy. And one of the things that we talked about earlier also is, what if empathy doesn't work? And you answered this question in a different conversation we were having. You said, well, then you're not being very empathetic, or you're not hitting it with the right empathy, because empathy, when it's correctly applied, works, right? Because you hit the person and you get them to understand that you're with them. And I think that was very important. Jeff, I have a question from Mimi Lichtenstein, and she's asking, what do you recommend when it comes to communicating via blogs, newsletters, and social media? How often and what themes? It's a big question.
And Mimi, it is great to connect with you. Mimi and I connected on LinkedIn. Actually, I think I finally accepted her connection request this morning. I would say the same thing. Please feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. And you're going to hate this answer, but how big is a ball of string? And the answer is, it depends, right? It's my favorite consultant answer of all time, I swear. Every audience is different. Every audience has different needs. And it would be inappropriate of me to offer you the same answer that the other 350 people on this call right now are going to get. I, for example, in my own business, in my own marketing, I have ongoing updates and communications and tips and tricks and things like that I send out, as any business owner does. And I make a point of not sticking to a schedule, because I like to build the fact in that if you see something from me in your inbox, it's relevant. There's something going on in the world, and this is going to be helpful. And I would urge you to honor that same advice. If there is something out there that you have been communicating with your audiences and you feel is going to be helpful to them right now and now, maybe it's once a day, maybe it's once a month. Just be relevant, be helpful. I hate monthly communication if you have nothing new and relevant to communicate, or anything on a schedule. I'm just a much bigger fan, especially in the middle of a global pandemic. Don't contribute to the noise, contribute to the knowledge. So I hope that helps answer the question.
No, I think it does, and it's also very difficult to give specific answers with such a big group. But I think one example that we can play on, which is a bit what Annie Lucas is referring to, is, so let's say if I am a DMC or a tour operator, and I have a business, for example, that I sell Africa. So I do outbound. I am known as the Africa specialist, or we can use any destination for that matter. And we're all still living a situation in my destination, whatever it is, that it's unclear. What is my message of empathy when my main product, my destination, is uncertain? What do I say?
You're honest about that. What I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm being a smartass. I don't want to be pithy about this, but if you don't know the answer, you know what? We've asked ourselves those very same questions. You're asking some really legitimate, some really great questions right now. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and quite honestly, I don't think anyone knows the answer to that right now. I will tell you this: we're going to do everything we can to get those answers. When we have those answers, I look forward to sharing those answers with you. But I think we all, like you, want the answers to those questions.
And in a campaign, do you think it's still appropriate to talk about the dream? And so if I'm talking about Africa, and I'm using Africa just, because it came to a head and I kind of miss Africa, but no, but would it not be appropriate as a DMC if I am communicating to my market, not necessarily on the phone, but through an email marketing or through social media, that I could continue to share the dream of Africa and say, at the moment, as you said, we don't know when the borders are going to open. We can't tell you when you're going to be able to live all this, magical experiences again. But in the meantime, is that still an appropriate message to use, or does it get old?
Uh, it- yes and no. If you're doing it well, then it's not. If you're just contributing to the noise for the sake of trying to be top of mind to a stressed out audience right now on something that honestly isn't really a big issue for them, then it's going to get old in a hurry. Uh, there are tons of examples. It's not a hotel or a luxury tourism example, but right now I've seen a lot of amusement parks and theme parks and attractions have set up a GoPro on the very front of their roller coasters, and they're simply making first person YouTube videos available so that parents can put their kids in front of YouTube and go for the entire ride around the local Six Flags or Canada's Wonderland. Um, all that is a theme park operator recognizing that by the way, their customers aren't the kids. Their customers are the parents of the kids, and it's smart marketing. Hey, look, here's half an hour. It's going to buy you some peace. That alone, frankly, as a parent right now, is far more powerful and persuasive and empathetic to me than any say, hey, wouldn't it be awesome to come on out to, no, it's, we get it. Here's the situation everyone's in.
Yeah, no, and it's funny, we had, and just to round that up, we had a great TL talk, which we have in English every Friday, and we're going to have an amazing one this Friday. But we were talking to Fahad, who is an incredible journalist in London, and I asked him if he thought the trend that Portugal, I think it's a trend that Portugal starting with a seal of safe and clean, is a trend, and is that going to work? And this is something that we were talking about before, and at the end of the day, and I think some people mentioned it here, the importance of relationship and the importance of knowing who that information is coming from. Like if I'm going to call, if I'm going to go to Africa, I'm going to call Philip Latigan because I trust him, because he's the owner of Journey Beyond and I've known him for years, and he's going to tell me the real deal. And I think I'll prioritize that possibly more than a seal. And I would love to hear that from your perspective of it. How much do you think these seals of guarantee of approval are going to be helping us drive business or not?
So I have some pretty set opinions on that. I don't want to offend any of your audience. Let me try to do this without swearing, but it's a completely useless waste of everyone's time because the audience doesn't really care whether you are safe and clean. They're going to assume you're safe and clean. If you're doing your job, you're clean. You need to be able to prove that. You need to be able to back that up. But that's not what your audience is really asking. That's not what people are going to make a decision whether or not to travel to Portugal or not based on whether or not it's clean. They're going to do that based on whether or not it's safe for their family, whether they can feel trusted there, whether they can, make a emotional purchase decision to click that button and buy that flight and to go there. That's what's going to be far more effective than some BS, sticker from a government website that says they're safe and clean or not. It's the same mentality that's going into a lot of different restaurants. I saw a picture probably on LinkedIn, and it was a restaurant in Amsterdam that's putting little greenhouses over every table. So they had, and it's cute, and people are like, "Oh, that's so lovely." I can't. And I'm like, that's a horrible idea, because you can't do that full time. A business, a restaurant depends on having people come in and out of those tables. They need easy and quick access to the tables. And frankly, it doesn't keep your patrons any safer because you're still not wiping down the handrails. You're not wiping down the toilet seats after every person uses them. There's lots of opportunities for cross contamination anyway. So at that point, all that little greenhouse is a very large, very public, very conspicuous piece of what I call sanitation theater. And if it's theater versus legitimate sanitation operations, the only reason that's there is to communicate. It's a business owner who thinks that people care about how clean they are, and so they're using it as a communications tool. The problem is you can't continue to run a business like that. And so eventually, as things calm down, they're going to have to take those greenhouses away. And when they do that, they're going to piss people off. They're going to be like, how are you making us less safe? How dare you? They've just extenuated the problem even further on themselves. So it's the perils of sanitation theater. The only reason they're doing that is to communicate. For heaven's sakes, find better ways to communicate. If they're
Empathy.
doing it because it's legitimate, that's great. But if it's
Yeah.
if it's just, yeah.
Can you, I think this is a good one. Are you able to give some examples or point to some websites or that they can look at as people or companies that have been doing a good job, like a benchmark? Have you seen any companies out there that you can say, look, these guys have been really communicating very well. They've adapted their message. I personally can think of one, but I'm
I'd
sure
be
that
I'd be honestly, I'd be curious who you're thinking of, because I'm always kind of curious and keeping half an eye out. What have you seen?
I'm very lucky. We've worked for many years with some great clients, and some of them tend to be ahead of the curve. And one of them is Aqua Expeditions. We're actually going to have the CEO Francesco on our talk on Friday, and it's been very, very interesting because despite everything that's happening, he runs a small cruise operation. It's a very, very exclusive, coastal experience in Peru and in Cambodia, very high end. And right now, you could look at that and say, oh my God, who wants to get on a boat, right? And yet they've been experiencing fantastic business because people are looking at them and saying, this is the most exclusive experience I can have if I charter this whole, mini boat, because they're very exclusive, very small. So it's become like the best thing, and it's coastal, so they're not worried about going from one country to the other. And where he's invested his energy and his time and utilized specialists is in creating a new communications manual. So he's been sharing it with travel agents. He's been sharing it with hoteliers, with his entire team, using this time to change the vocabulary that people use when they sell, when they communicate about the project. Because is it a cruise? No, it's not a cruise. These are small vessels. So these small words, and it's important that travel agents adapt their language. It's important that hoteliers adapt their language. It's learning to express the same message without using words that can trigger concern. There's some words right now that just because of what we are hearing in the news, or they start to trigger emotions that you're not really associating it directly, but you're like, oh my God, a cruise, oh my God. So they've come out with a very nice manual, and they're doing training on how to sell the product without, by changing the vocabulary. And it's brilliant. I keep thinking, wow, if you're going to invest in everything, invest in communication, change the way and communicate so that in your language there's empathy. And they're not doing it alone. They have professionals that are helping them and saying, this way of describing shows more empathy than this way. Just you put that little list, which when you highlight it, it's like, oh yeah, that one does work. But when you're talking about an entire project or entire business, there's so many gaps, there's so many holes that you can fall into, little traps. So it needs to be a job well done. It needs to be something well thought out, and they've really put themselves ahead of the curve, I think.
This really is a great example of why you can't do this on your own, because the problem is,
Yeah.
you can build the one thing, but it's the parts. It's like you just identified, there's a ton of little gaps. It's making sure that the 17-year-old who's working the front desk that evening is on board with that same level of communication. It's the the proper training for your maintenance staff, on and on and on, and not just on the operation side, but what to do when they run into a concerned guest.
No,
um,
and an agent as well. So if I'm an agent, if I'm a travel agent, and I know that selling this product, I'm backed up with verbiage
mhm,
that's not going to scare my client, you know what? I'll sell this one because this one's wrapped in a security blanket, literally. The
yep.
other one is full of holes, and I can get trapped in communicating something that can get my client to feeling insecure. So I'm going to hang on to this one as much as I can because it's protected. It's so simple. It's just the way the language right now. And I think a lot of people were concerned at the beginning, thinking, but am I supposed not to say the truth? I mean, isn't the facts what creates trust? Yes, as you said, nobody's implying not to say the truth, but is it packaged in a way that makes people feel safe?
So the truth is sometimes not friendly, but the truth is
Yeah.
always your friend, because the truth doesn't go anywhere. The truth is always going to be the truth. Now, sometimes the truth needs help, right? But it's like that flashlight at the end of a very dark tunnel. As long it will be there. That light is going to be there. And yeah, then none of this works if you're not being honest. It's not about honesty. I mean, it's not about lying to your audience. If the minute that happens, all of this gets flushed out the window. You can't.
Yeah.
None of it will work. But
Yeah.
it's
And I
funny
think,
because you mentioned the companies that are doing it well. Honestly, part of here's my uh, I don't know all the answers to that because I'm a crisis communicator. I'm the one who gets called in when all of them fail. And I could tell I have a laundry list of companies that are doing it poorly right now, but that's just a case of what I'm looking for. Not I don't
yeah.
pay attention to the guys who are doing it well.
Yeah, that's funny. But another one that they mentioned is Portugal has had an amazing communication strategy. They came out with a video that showed empathy. They came out with a video that supported people's feelings and put everybody, at home, worried, concerned, being detached from loved ones, having their routine taken away from them. And suddenly you're in that video and it's talking to you. It's like I was there
Mhm.
going, yeah, that he's talking to me. Like it's literally that's me. And so suddenly my years of communication are much more open because I feel that he was empathetic to me, and then he lets you dream, and it's a beautiful message. And we're happy to share that example also. If you're
But
looking for,
they needed to hit you with empathy first before
yeah,
your ears would open.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
you just, yeah, and that's it exactly. It's fire retardant foam. Before you heard that empathy note, you're anxious. You're like the sticky side of Velcro, not the fuzzy side of Velcro, right? Empathy
yeah.
turns you into the fuzzy side of Velcro.
No, it's very, very true. And it's not that easy to do, especially when you're also scared and you're also confused. And so it is something to be, right now people have more time and getting help to say, okay, how do I communicate my message? If I'm a travel agent and I want to show empathy, it's funny. My husband owns a travel agency. So I live with this, for many of you who are travel agents, I live it every day. And one of my that I hear my husband saying a lot, and when they call him and say, "Can I go to New York in November? Can I book Caribbean in September? Can I?" And he says, "Right now, I don't know, but as soon as the moment is ready, I will be able to tell you where to go, how to get there, who's going to pick you up, how they're going to pick you up, and I will be able to walk you through the process and make sure that you're going to be safe throughout. Until I know where that moment is or where destination it is, I'm going to just relax. Let's dream, let's discuss, let's converse about travel. But we're not ready yet. And I think that alone, that's putting a stop and saying it's not yet the time, creates trust. It's knowing to say, look, I'm not going to sell you anything right now because I can't guarantee that it's going to be okay in the short term. In the long term, yes. Book for end of year, book for 2021. There is a lot of flexibility, so you can book and rebook and all that. Yes, but if somebody says, can I go June 1st to the Caribbean? I don't know. I can't tell you that you can. We can book it and we can reschedule it if need be, but I can't 100% put my name to it because we don't know, and that's okay.
So, and the spirit of shameless promotion, 2 weeks from now, Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, I'm going to have a whole segment on what to do with the question, can you guarantee me that my family will be safe? especially when the answer is no, you can't, right? We're going to do a whole thing on messaging and what to do with people who are looking for guarantees, and what the people who are anxious and need to be messaged properly. What is that messaging you're going to do? We're not doing it next week because next week is Memorial Day for those of us who are in the United States. I'm Canadian. Today is Victoria Day, but 2 weeks Monday. Sorry, shameless plug.
Yeah, no, so that's true. 2 weeks. So not exactly, not next Monday, the following Monday, we're going to have the second series of this crisis communication one-on-one. And we're going to address exactly this topic that Jeff is talking about, is what is the next step. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but we do have a certificate for completing the 3 courses. And I think that as you get into it and you start to develop this communication, it's really going to help answer a lot of these questions, because we'll make sure that every question that was asked and we weren't able to address, we're going to make sure that is addressed in the next one, so that we can make sure that whoever is still with questions will get your answers soonest rather than later.
Well, and sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I know you and I had talked about the ability to be able to connect one-on-one with some people. And so let me just float that. I mean, there's 195 people who are still paying attention. If you had the opportunity to sit down with Tina and I directly one-on-one, is that something that would be of interest to you? And that's just something that we're trying to suss out. Do we want to build the infrastructure? Do we want to build the ability to sit down and just have a half-hour meeting and go through it? And we're getting here we go. We're getting so
yeah, okay.
Keep an eye on your inbox. If you've registered for the webinar, you will get a follow-up email, and we'll put together a link that you can click, and you can find a time that works in your calendar, and you can book it, and we'll get together on Zoom one-on-one, and we'll just bang through some of the answers. If in the spirit of full disclosure, it's not a sales conversation. That's not what this is about. That being said, I mean, at the same time, this is what we all do for a living. There's nothing shameful in talking about money. If there's an opportunity to do some work together, we'll take a look with your permission on what that would look like. But it's not intended to be a sales conversation.
No, yeah. If you want Jeff to build your whole communication strategy, he's gonna love to do that, and he could do the whole thing. But that's a whole different thing. But what I had asked for is to say, look, let's do these series, and if somebody has questions, and we have friends here, we have Anna, who's a good friend. Raquel is here from Italy, and she's going to bombard you with some serious loaded questions, because she's fantastic. We have Eric from Japan. We've got everybody here. So you're going to hear from some very important travel professionals, Cynthia. And so it's a very valuable community to me. And what I've been doing throughout this whole initiative, through our talks on Fridays and to the Brazilian market also on Wednesdays, is just find a way to help. And I think communication is essential. And Jeff is somebody I trust, and he's helped me, and hopefully he can help all of you. And we look forward to seeing you at the worst case scenario 2 Mondays from now. Otherwise, we look forward to hearing from you, and so we can do some one-to-one chatting and keep the conversation going. How's that?
I had a great time. Thanks so much for the invitation. I look forward to connecting one-on-one with folks. And again, I look forward to being back here 2 weeks from now.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Lovely to have all of you. Thanks for logging in, and we'll stay in touch. Ciao. Thank you.